Hi y'all, my name is Lily Archive. I talk about fundies and sometimes other stuff. Today we're going to be doing the Duggar 2024 update. Let's jump right into January. So starting right off in January, John's wife Abby did an announcement. She said, I'm making a big announcement, and it turned out she's just joining an MLM. She joined Monet. I do believe she is the first Duggar to join an MLM publicly though. Then we had James visiting the Vuolos in LA, and he actually posed with Ginger's book that came out in 2023, Becoming Free Indeed, where she talked about disentangling her faith from fear and leaving the IBLP after her marriage to Jeremy. Next up in January, we have Jinger doing an ad for a Christian healthcare company. Now, Jess has also done ads for this company, but this was a particularly interesting event that happens because Justin's mother-in-law Hillary, who you all know I love talking about, who isn't really online as much as she used to be, but Justin's mother-in-law Hillary came under the comments and said, it's great until you have a child with cancer. It's another story then. Now, this is the first anybody's ever hearing of one of Hillary's children having cancer, but regardless, it is so interesting that she came under and criticized Jinger for her association with this company. Joy also shares in January on her YouTube channel that while she did save her first kiss for marriage, she wouldn't have mind kissing at, say, engagement.
Okay, was your first kiss at your wedding? Yes, it was. And Austin's first kiss was at our wedding too. Would I do that again? I'm not like upset about it that's how it happened. I grew up thinking that was best, and I'm glad that Austin was my first kiss, so I wouldn't change that aspect of it. But I don't know, like Austin and I have talked about it, like what are we going to do with our kids, and I think it'll look different. I don't know like what, because we're first-time parents, you know, we don't know. But I think it would have been like we had our first kiss in front of, I think it was 1,200 people, and so it wasn't super special and intimate. So I don't think we would necessarily, like, if we go back, I think we would have changed it, but, I mean, I'm not upset about it, like, it is what it is, but I think I would have liked to be able to kiss before, like, when we were engaged or something, so.
Finally, our last update in January, Jill and Derek were featured on the Matt&Abby podcast. Now, we're going to look at a few clips, but I will say that in this video, we are going to be covering a lot of Matt&Abby clips. I mean, they were collecting the Duggar sisters on their podcast this year, and I hear that Ginger's going to be slated for another interview. But let's jump into these clips.
I've never even heard of the IBLP ever. I didn't know what that was until the documentary, so that was all new to me. So I'm curious, did it accurately depict what the IBLP was from your perspective?
I think they did a really good job of setting it up for people, like you're saying, who've never heard of IBLP, this organization that I kind of grew up in, and the wild, crazy ideas that a bunch of people just caught on to.
It tended to draw a lot of people from broken backgrounds who wanted a checklist of what they could do to fix their lives. And I thought that documentary did a good job of describing that well.
But I think they also were not, they're not coming from the perspective of advocating for something. All they're doing is like presenting these facts and then saying like, here's how it got here.
I was glad to hear that Jill and Derek did like the documentary that they were in. I wouldn't want them to have like a negative experience per se. I'm kind of glad Paul and Morgan had a negative experience because it was kind of entertaining seeing them crash out afterwards. However, I'm glad Jill and Derek did have a positive experience, but I'm glad that they don't have much to say about it. I know that a lot of Christians were kind of concerned that it painted a lot of Christians or maybe the broader Christian landscape in a bad arc, or maybe even came against homeschooling. I think that was a little dramatic, though. I heard good things from both sides, Christians and non-Christians, pretty much all across the board. So I was really glad to hear that they did approve of the documentary.
You were young. Like, were you guys...
Young and poor.
Yeah, were you poor, basically? Like, with that many children, or was it just really hard to pay the bills? Because I can imagine that many children under one roof, that the expenses must have been astronomical, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't balancing the budget with my parents, but I did know that there were times before the show where things were very tight, and my parents would say, hey, we need to pray for this or that.
Well, you told me about one time
we sold this property.
Yeah, you told me about one time where you put your blanket in the freezer so that whenever you went to bed, you'd be cool without AC.
Yeah, like when we moved, we were staying in a rental house. This was after the show had started, but before the series started. Our AC went out in this rental house, and it was just really hot. So my sisters and I, like, stuck our our sheets and pillowcases, I think, or pillows in Walmart sacks in the freezer, in the deep freeze, just to cool them down. So that way, whenever we got in bed, then we'd feel cooled down. And then when we moved into our big house that like we all helped build, and the show was helping some, but again, it was right around the time that the bigger series started. We didn't have AC that whole first summer that we lived in the house. We didn't even have running water for 2 weeks. Isn't that crazy?
So they helped pay for the house a little bit.
TLC
did.
would cover, like, for example, like there might be an interior designer who comes to like film this, like, hey, the house is all finished or whatever. Like, we're moving in. And so they come and stage it with all of their things. And then I remember that we got to pick a certain number of decorations to keep, and the rest went back to the shop. Like,
No way.
So I will say that Matt and Abby, for not being like huge Duggar watchers, I guess, did ask some pretty good questions. And I think that it was interesting how they focused each of the interviews on different topics that really pertain to each sister. For example, Jill's looked a lot at the finances, the relationships with the family, fallout after the book, but really a lot on the finances, and I appreciated that because that's something I would like to learn more about. I did know a little bit about this, but it's interesting hearing a little bit more from directly from them rather than in the book.
in their eyes, making decisions that would potentially be harmful to me and were so big and countercultural, that I would go so far as to say, like, in their view, jeopardizing my salvation at that point.
And like really the reality TV just poured gasoline on the fire that was already there, like, because that would have been the case, I think, and Jill and I have talked about this, like with or without the reality show, this control issue would have been a thing, but it just blew everything out of proportion with like, well, now if the patriarch has more money, there's more control and there's more things you can hold over somebody.
When did you notice that your dad ended up putting the show above the family?
It's hard to pinpoint like one time because it did evolve. It was very much an evolution, but it was still always very much like we talk about in the book, where there's this whole, like, it's a ministry, but it's also a financial business decision as well. So you can play to whichever side you want.
Like 95% sure the show would not have persisted as long as it did if as each adult sibling became an adult and said, I would rather not do filming. And if none of the adults wanted to do filming, it wouldn't have persisted that long.
We also didn't have the freedom to make that guilt-free decision either. You might be presented with like a pseudo decision, choice, whatever. But then there's still this like, but we kind of expect this to be in our good graces. Well, with reality TV, you add that to it, and it's like you have to have a pre-courtship.
Pre?
Well,
Yes.
pre if you're really young.
Hold up.
I was like, at some point, it's the same as like any other high school dating. It's like,
because
this
you
is
have to get to know the
courtship because you're
person.
15.
When you're in a reality TV show or you're in the spotlight or whatever, you don't want to like get to know the person for the first time on TV, because what if you don't work out?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to do this secret like pre-courtship, and then you can have your pre-courtship on.
We need a diagram. We need a diagram.
On camera.
Your pre-courtship.
You can have your pre-courtship on camera where you're kind of getting to know them, but you kind of already know, like, maybe you're gonna work out. And
Or
then
we're just friends. No,
just
this
friends,
isn't just friends.
but we're committed friends. And then you have
committed friends.
And then you have like the official ask. But we had to like involve the cameras and all of that. But I wouldn't even tell the producers until I had an idea that I was gonna like go further. But
So I realized that was a pretty large chunk of clip, but one part I wanted to kind of pick out of the rest was when Derick said it's a pre-courtship. It's like high school dating because you're 15. I wonder who he was talking about there, because I wonder, other than Josh, I don't know if anybody's like pre whatever courtships starting that early. Like, and when I say that, I mean Josh and Kaylee, not Josh and Anna. But I wonder who he's talking about there.
Like, my brother has to come
Did
with
you guys
us.
keep like a foot between you? No, I'm just kidding. Like,
6-inch rule.
Actually, there was a 6-inch rule.
Yes, kind of, yeah. Like you couldn't.
So could you sit next to each other, but only with a 6-inch space?
Pretty much, yeah.
Really? And could you hold hands?
Not until we were engaged.
Not allowed to.
Whoa.
And we didn't kiss until our wedding day.
Wow, yeah.
But
And which was
we're-
on national.
Yeah.
You're like, how do I do? Did you have to have someone teach you how to kiss? Because that's stressful.
So that
Those
was
are
actually-
the lips, right?
No, but that was your actual first kiss. It was on national television.
Yeah.
Wow.
From every angle, and then they like analyze it. The first actually,
That's so much
when
pressure.
I first watched our wedding show, I cried and I called the producer and like chewed him out. I was like, no, it was
Why?
terrible. It was terrible.
What did they do?
Like,
Not because she's
okay.
a diva, but because the whole thing
No,
about
my
like just
wedding was great. It was
Yeah.
the show, like the editing and everything. They were like trying to make it look like, I don't know, they were trying to like play up different aspects of it, where they're
Okay.
like rating our kiss and like having all my siblings give commentary on it, and like,
But
it was just-
especially when like
That's
this
your wedding
is like,
day.
Yeah,
yeah, I was
it's your
like,
wedding
make
day,
it about the wedding day.
like, shut up,
This
like-
is like, give me a break.
Is that your first kiss too, Derick?
With
No.
her, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, so
So yeah, that was my follow-up question. What are your current views on courtship? Like, is that something you would encourage your sons to do, or
a different version.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that we will have a lot of say-so as they're growing to adulthood. Like, what should relationships look like? What should this dating experience be? I'm not just going to be, like, hands-off completely as they're maturing. Like, I think when they're under our roof, like, we're going to have some pretty strict rules. We're not just going to let them, like, sleep around at home or something.
Yeah.
But I think that it will not be as strict.
so curious. Have you guys talked to your parents since the release of the book?
Yes, I didn't, like, sit down and have a conversation and say, what do you think about the book?
Okay.
Not that kind
Did
of
they
thing.
read it, or
I've heard that they did.
Oh, you all know Jim Bob read that dang book. Like, you know, he's the type of guy who would have, like, Google alerts about himself and his family. They say, and when I say they, I don't even know who the hell I'm talking about, but they say, you know, he's really into his image. I mean, he is a businessman at the end of the day. I feel like they do. My dad is a businessman. He tends to be a little bit more into his image than maybe I would and how people perceive him. So it does not surprise me at all that he was running to read that book.
was the last time that you were all together with your parents, was that the birth of your most recent son?
Probably.
Trying to think.
Which I guess
Like,
was
wait, was
17
it
months.
As
that,
best
or
I
was
can
it a
tell.
wedding, or was it a? Have there been any weddings since then? I can't remember.
don't-
I feel like I saw. No. We saw them at a birthday party.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we saw them at a birthday
What
party
was
since
that?
then.
Which birthday?
Joy and Austin's, like, one of their kids' birthday thing or something, or baby announcement or something. I don't know, some kind of family function thing.
And you guys just don't really talk, or you kind
But
of
that
just
was
say
not.
hi?
That was before the book.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
before the
that
book.
was over a year ago.
But that was
okay.
since we had our last baby.
So those are most of the clips that I found interesting from the Jill and Derek episode. I honestly fear that this video might just be a lot of Matt and Abby clips, because that was, I mean, other than Jana and Jason's wedding, there wasn't a lot of news, to be honest, this year. But I do want to know if you guys want me to do kind of an episode that is surrounded these 3 Matt and Abby podcasts, and there's one more that is set to be coming out. Ginger and Jeremy just posted that they filmed another one, a second interview with Matt and Abby. So if you want to see kind of me react to all of those, obviously not every single portion, but a lot of the parts that I find interesting, let me know and I'll make that video. February was kind of a slow month for the Duggars. Jeremiah and Hannah welcomed their second child, another daughter, Brielle Grace, sometime in February. She joined her sister, Brenly Noel, who was about 14 months at the time. March was another super slow month for the Duggar family, but John David Duggar did lose his constable seat. In April, Jill and Derek unfortunately shared that they experienced a stillbirth of their daughter, Isla Marie Dillard. A formal funeral was held, and the entire Duggar and Dillard families came together to share in mourning the loss of Isla Marie. Starting off in May, Jana returned to Instagram with a few posts, a reel, and some stories after 2 years of being absent from Instagram and YouTube. Also in May, Anna Duggar for some reason decided it was a good idea to come back to X after 2 years of absence to talk about Trump's trial. On YouTube, Joy shared that she's been disentangling her own faith after being inspired by her sisters, in particularly Jinger. She makes that clear, in particular Jinger, not Jill. For our final update for the month of May, Jason hard-launched his relationship with a 20-year-old young lady named Maddie Grace Jones. Now, as you can see, they're not doing a no-touch courtship. From what I can tell, I would safely assume that she's the average Christian girl. Now, I was one of the people who totally thought that he was in a relationship with Claire Langdon. I still kind of think he might have been dating her and they broke up. We'll probably never know. So as the public can tell, the first part of 2024 was pretty mundane for the Duggars, but in June it starts ramping up. The least interesting thing that happened in June was it was discovered that Anna is running a puppy mill for some reason. Joy also announced that she's taking a little step back from YouTube, and to this day she still hasn't fully returned. One of the biggest pieces of June news for the Duggars was, thankfully, the Supreme Court denied Josh Duggar's appeal in his CSAM case. Jana returned to YouTube in June after 2 years off the platform, and her videos were doing extremely well. She did some life updates, and she even announced that she's living in a tiny house on her parents' property. So don't worry, we are back to Matt and Abby podcasting. Alright, so this was the least interesting interview, in my opinion, of the 3 that were done this year. We're going to look at a few clips, though. This interview looks a lot into IBLP and kind of the beginnings of Ginger and Jeremy's relationship, but I don't feel like we necessarily learned a ton.
We're married, but you weren't having kids right away. Were you guys getting questions from your parents?
No, it was like, we got back from the honeymoon, and they were like... And I was looking at her like, is this normal to just be asking like, are you pregnant? Are you pregnant? Are you pregnant? And she's like, yes, in our setting it is. Like, and it was from like her siblings or like friends.
On the
they were
show, like they would ask us to all the time, and it was like
the producer every time we sit down for an interview, are you guys pregnant? Are you pregnant? Or like,
how did that make you feel?
Well, it made me feel. She was used to it, I think, or expecting it.
I expected it. Yeah. Because that's just what you do in those settings.
For me, I was like, hey, get out of that aspect of our life.
Yeah, he's like, that's weird.
Why are you asking us about
weird.
that?
Well, did they like assume that you were like not able to have kids, or were they thinking, oh my gosh, they're using birth control, that's not okay?
I don't know. We just didn't talk about it.
We waited a year, so
yeah, it wasn't super long.
Yeah.
Like it's a year.
Okay. Yeah,
it was just a year.
So very dramatic. And also, do y'all remember that clip on the show where Ginger is video chatting and Spurgeon was like super little? Spurgeon was there, all the sisters were there, and Jill goes, so are you expecting? Like, it just seems so rude, but at the same time, it's kind of what they do, but I also think that the producers were kind of egging that kind of stuff on.
Right, so...
I never did the only chaperones we would use is like, we'd go on a double date or something, because I just wasn't going to do...
Like, nah.
I wasn't going to have a 10-year-old kid with me.
Yeah.
Like, it was kind of absurd. So
Yeah, so it's going to
I was just like, you know what, Ben and Jess, you want to go on a double date
Did
or
this
something?
happen after
you really go from like, pastoring at church, I'm doing marriage counseling, and then step into a setting where it was like, those rules. And that's why I say it was like playing the rules, not the game. It was like so focused on the rules, missing the point of what we're doing, the objective here, which is like... And I told her, honestly, and this is why I wouldn't be pro-courtship or anything, if I need... Because the spirit behind it is good, right? Like, oh, you want to have purity, and you want to really focus on each other and not get physically entangled, and okay. But if I really need these rules to keep me moral, I'm not a good dude. Like, don't marry me. Forward. So I asked Mr. Duggar, and then he's like, let's get to know each other first. And then that's where him and I start talking. And he actually asked me soon after to start watching the Gothard stuff.
One thing I really wish they would have mentioned, or at least Matt and Abby would have asked, but I'm sure they're not privy to this or weren't aware of this, but I wish Jeremy would have talked more about how Jim Bob just, like, low-key hated his ass at first and was kind of not on board. I really wish we would get more of an explanation and questioning about how, you know, Ginger and Jeremy even came to be, with Jim Bob not being super sure about this guy at first.
With Jim Bob, did he ask you questions about, have you dated somebody before? Have you kissed somebody before?
Oh my goodness, bro. I had a 50-page questionnaire I filled out.
Wait, you're kidding. It was actually a sheet.
Yeah.
So it was like, how far have you been with a woman?
Yeah, everything.
Every single question. Have you smoked weed? Have you drank? All those questions in there. What was the most bizarre one that was like, what is, like, anything that threw you off that wasn't expected on the sheet?
Probably all of it. I think it started out like,
do you have any debt? What is, you know?
So it was financial, it was moral, it was relationships, it was past history, it was...
Family's history.
And so I'd had previous relationships. And so, yeah, and she was aware of that. But I was her first serious relationship, too, so...
So was that hard, though, not being... Because you had to keep physical distance between you at all times. You couldn't just, like, watch a movie with your hand over her shoulder, right? Like...
Well, we could sit on the couch next to each other or whatever, but, like, it was just rules. Like, they just have a lot of rules, so...
But for me, like, I was pastoring, I was really serious about my relationship with the Lord by that point in my life.
Yeah.
And so I wanted physical purity.
Yeah.
Y'all know Jim Bob had to be, like, horrified and hardcore judging at Jeremy's answers, and I'm sure Jeremy was honest. He seems like an earnest guy, and he seems like he wants to, like, he would have wanted to put, like, the truth out there with Ginger and getting it all out of the way, but I just want to know what was going through Jim Bob's head when he was reading these questionnaires.
So I'm sure you probably had to make some sacrifices for the show and to make that happen, right?
Yeah, that was interesting, the dynamics there. We chose not to make money an issue, because once you mix money and family, things get complicated real fast. We understood there was issues with the money. That show was making a ton of money, but Ginger and I just both determined we're not going to make this an issue. This is, even though this might be a hill that we can fight on, we're just not going to fight on that hill. And so if some came in, we were like, great. And if it didn't, we just honestly just said we're not going to fight that battle, because we just knew, honestly, we saw bigger issues. And I think there were some issues that seemed to be like leaves on the tree, but the root of the issue was deeper and more theological. And Ginger had a conviction, I want to speak to the deeper issues.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's fine. Everybody comes from their different perspectives. Obviously, Jill and Derick were kind of coming from the perspective of, hey, like, Jill's running around, you know, becoming a mom with the new baby and all the issues that come with that. We're trying to do a ministry. And at one point, not Bob, Jarek was working for Walmart 40 hours a week and just coming home exhausted to a camera crew. So I totally get where both sides are coming from here.
Like, I want my loved ones to see, like, to come out of these teachings. And so I want to be helpful to them, to, like, get them out of this system, to get them, like, that was my drive. And so I thought I want to be in a place where I can still talk to them and still be in their lives. Like, I don't want to be
alienated.
Like, yeah. I don't want to make unwise decisions to where it would be tough to do that later.
Yeah, I'm curious about, is, like, in choosing to write this book, was one of those tough conversations you had to have probably with your parents?
Yeah. I had to share with my parents. And it was hard having those conversations with them, because ultimately I chose to write my book from a perspective of the theology being the driving force, because I thought, if my mom reads this, if my dad reads this, if my siblings read this, how are they going to take it? I don't want to, like, not talk about things that need to be talked about, because they can be offended at what I said that is true. Like, you can be offended that I say that Bill Gothard is a false teacher. But I don't want you to be offended over a petty thing that I might have said about you.
All right, y'all. So that was all the Ginger and Jeremy clips, and honestly, I don't think that the next episode that they're going to be having soon with Matt and Abby is going to be all that interesting. I think it's just going to be promotion for Ginger's newest book, which we'll talk about here in a second. But we'll see. But I just felt like this one was the least interesting of all the podcasts that Matt and Abby did with the Duggars. Alright, let's get started on July. Jana posts photos of herself with John and Abby's family in Charleston. She's noticeably wearing a ring on her engagement ring finger. Now, this gets everybody talking. Honestly, when I first saw this, I didn't think it was anything. I thought she was kind of trolling or something. I was like, say it ain't so. I kind of thought maybe it was like a purity ring or something, but we'll get into that in next month's update. Also in July, Jed and Katey came out with a YouTube video, not only announcing they were pregnant with twins, but announcing that they are pregnant with twin girls. After over 30 grand Duggars, these are going to be the first twins by a twin. Ginger and Jeremy start their podcast back up after quite a large hiatus. In their first episode, they announced they are moving out of their current house and into a new one, but are staying within California. They sold their home for around $899K. Miss Anna Duggar decides to once again get back on Twitter/X to talk about the Trump shooting. August was a huge month for the Duggars. Jana filed for a marriage license with Stephen Wissmann on August 14th. It leaked onto Reddit the next day. Without a Crystal Ball and Pickles from Facebook soon leaked the wedding website content and invitation respectively. It confirms the wedding date is for that day of the leak, Thursday, August 15th. Now, Jana and Stephen were rumored to be together a long time ago, back when Jer and Hannah were courting, but it seems that was no longer to be, which we learn more about that the next day in the People article. Jana and Stephen, who is already the brother-in-law of Jana's brother Jeremiah, wed, and the exclusive photos went to People magazine. Jana explained in her article that she dated Stephen years ago and decided to get back together with him earlier that year after he asked her out via a letter. She reveals they got engaged exactly a month before the wedding. Jana and Stephen even shared a first dance. Jill later confirms that was the first Duggar wedding to include a first dance. Jana and Stephen celebrated their honeymoon, and then Jana moved in with Stephen in a little house they're fixing up in Lincoln, Nebraska, where he's from. On to Ginger. She shared in her newly renewed podcast that she and her siblings experienced food insecurity growing up. This corroborates stories that Jill's been telling for several years. For our final August update, on August 24th, Jason asked Maddie Jones to marry him on the beach. She swiftly made a IG handle under the name Duggar. Honestly, I didn't find it that weird. Jessa did the same thing, but with Seawald, before they were even engaged. Moving on to September, so Jason was actually sued for allegedly not having a contractor's license and not completing work. He was kind of promoting himself as a contractor. It was kind of interesting looking at that lawsuit and a few different videos that I saw. And some of his texts on Facebook Messenger were actually put as forth as evidence. So that was kind of interesting. If you want me to cover that, let me know in the comments. I probably won't, but if people want me to, I will. People kind of knew about this for a while. The streets were talking, but in September, Ginger finally announced that she's releasing another book called People Pleaser. So this comes just a couple years after becoming free indeed. She's wearing this fuck-ass hat a la Lauren Duggar, so she's kind of stealing her style there. But I've heard rumors that Ginger might have a 3-book contract, so this would be the second of third. And then also she wrote a book with Jeremy, and she wrote a children's book, and then obviously wrote books with her sisters growing up. So she's quite the author now. So final part of September, Ivanka Trump actually joined MedicCorps in their Hurricane Helene relief. So if you're not aware, MedicCorps is a disaster relief foundation founded by John Duggar and Nathan Bates. Jason and Maddie wed in Tennessee on October 3rd, and they're People exclusive. Jason reveals he met Maddie in late 2023 on Instagram. He met her because he told Jana that she should put herself out there. To prove his own point, he said he could find himself a girl online, and then he found Maddie on Instagram. They both used several of Jason's siblings in both sides of their wedding parties. Also in October, Ginger announced she found out she was pregnant in July. The baby is due in March of 2025, and Felicity will be 6, and Evangeline will be 4 when this baby is born. Now our last bit of October news is that Joy and Austin actually jumped on the Matt&Abby podcast. Now out of the 3 podcasts that Matt&Abby did with the Duggar couples, this was by far the most interesting. I feel like there was the most new information in this one. This one really focused on how Joy and Austin got together, and kind of Joy's postpartum depression and kind of her thoughts with her faith. Now, I feel like we did learn a lot more because a lot less is known about this couple. I feel like they're a lot less talkative as a couple than maybe Jill&Derick, and especially compared to Ginger and Jeremy. So it was interesting getting to hear them talk more, especially Austin. He talked a lot, and usually he's a pretty quiet guy.
We met, so I was 4 and he was 8 when we originally met, like our families. I just turned 13 at this time. Or I was 13, almost 14 at this time. And so I remember like meeting you, knowing who your family was, like around that time. And then at 14, I started crushing hard on you. And he didn't, I don't think he ever knew that I was, did you ever know that I had a crush on you?
Mm-mm.
No. Anyway, so
I mean, I'm 18, right? She's 14, I'm 18. Like, weird. And I'm hanging out with her older brother, John, who's, he's 22 at the time? Or, he's 22 at the time, and I'm 18, and so...
He was oblivious that
you
weren't
even paying attention to her. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Austin really said, "Internet, please do not think that I was interested in a 14-year-old. Please do not get this misconstrued. Let me be very clear."
Come on your radar. When did you start to notice her? Okay, that is that's a long story.
Well, you don't have to go into detail.
So I was 21, and I'd been interested in this other girl. And
he had been talking to me and Ginger and Jana about this other girl that he was going to go ask.
Oh,
talking
snap.
to you about
it? Oh, yeah. Jana and her and Ginger, like, it was this time where, like, we were all close, right? And so I'm telling them about this girl that I want to, like, start dating down in Texas.
And I was fully supportive. I was like, that's so good for you. I'm so happy. And it crushed on the inside, like, okay, maybe this isn't going to happen.
That was kind of cute how she's still kind of jealous about that. It's kind of funny.
So while I'm at flight school, long story, while it's almost over. While I'm at flight school, one day I get out of bed, I'm sitting there, and the thought comes in my mind, well, what about Joy? And I'm like, nah, she's way too young. Like, no. And like, I just said, I'm not, like, gonna be distracted by other things. Like, nah. And so... long story short, she was all I could think about. I'm at flight school literally trying to learn how to fly airplanes. And the only thing I can think about is, what about Joy?
Okay, so on my side is, like, I'm 17, almost 18 at this point, and...
Well, you were, because this is December.
I just turned 18.
You just turned 18.
Okay.
I don't know why this is so funny to me, but Austin, for real, is just like, guys, please do not get these rumors started. I don't want to be like Kelton Balka being talked about like a minor all this time. Please.
So at this point, I'm like talking to my parents every night, my mom, my dad, and like, I feel like I'm going to marry this guy. I don't know what to do. Like, and my dad's like, well, I don't know if it'll ever happen, because we knew him growing up. My dad knew, like, whatever. He didn't want to, like, get my hopes up for something. And I had not shown interest. I really tried to not be that girl that's, like, pursuing him and, like, throwing myself at him, because I'm like, what if he's not? Like, I don't want to ruin our relationship.
I mean, also, I feel like it was kind of in the culture not to flirt. Let the guy come to you. Let the guy come to your father, I guess I should say. And really don't show that you're interested because that makes you look a certain way or something. And you don't want, like, the man to get used to you chasing after him. He needs to chase after you.
Because we were good friends at this point. We were talking, like, he would share stuff that he was going through. So I feel like we both kind of came to that point at the same time, unknowingly, that we were both just thinking about each other. God, is this what you have for us? But none of us knew that the other person was thinking the same thing.
I don't know. In my mind, they're low-key flirting. Like, I feel like she has a very bubbly, flirty personality regardless. So I can see how, even if you say you're not flirting, you low-key might be a little bit.
So,
Did your parents like Austin when you brought up Austin?
Not really.
well, so here's the thing. They've known me, right, since I was 8 years old. And I went through a little bit of a rebellious time for several years. And so
He's a little bit of a wild card.
well, in our circle.
Yeah,
you
in
know
our
what
circle.
I mean?
In secular worlds, not
Yeah,
at all.
yeah,
good,
but in our
circles,
circle.
he was a little bit wild.
Started listening to like AC/DC and Kiss on the weekends.
Yeah, well, just country music.
Just
country
country
music.
Yes,
Think
so he
about
was
that.
hanging with the wrong crowd, which they were. I mean, yeah, your friends now, or their lives are torn apart. The ones that you had hung out with back then.
Yeah, a lot of them. And I didn't really fit the mold of the, like, conservative homeschool kids, right?
He
Like,
didn't have a shirt tucked in.
yeah, like when
belt pulled tight.
when we would go swimming, like, I'd take my shirt off. Like, I know that seems totally natural. Like, well, why wouldn't you? Okay, but the world in which she grew up in is like you swim fully clothed, like the
in
boys,
a dress, yeah.
Well, yeah, the boys didn't wear dresses, but yeah,
Not for the boys.
yeah,
Wait,
that,
the boys
like,
wore. You had to wear a T-shirt as
a
the boys.
t-shirt, blue jeans, no shorts.
Wait, blue jeans
In the pool?
swimming in a pool?
So to me, this is one of the most interesting parts about the interview because I feel like I didn't know this. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't know this. I did not know that Jim Bob didn't really like Austin at first or that he had a rebellious phase. I feel like the narrative has always kind of been he was known and he was a part of that community, unlike the other three original brother-in-laws, and kind of he was easily accepted. So it's like interesting that that narrative wasn't really true. Jim Bob wasn't quite sure of Austin at first.
My brothers, probably until I was 15, 16, they didn't wear shorts.
I was a huge impact on the boys, especially today, taking their shirts off and wearing shorts. So yeah, at this point he's known me for like 15 years or something. Mm-hmm. So it's almost easier having a clean slate, a guy walking in with a clean slate.
Jeremy
and
had it easy, right?
Well, I think he did.
Yeah.
Not really.
I think he did. I was asking specifically that God would lay it on my dad's heart, and I just really value his opinion and his outlook, and like I just really I wanted his blessing. And you know, if God hasn't put it on his heart at this point, then I've probably missed it, and I'll reevaluate. So I was like, Dad, let me ask you a question. Do you think there's anybody that I should be pursuing? Like, you know, I've been flipping houses, whatever, kind of doing this. Am I missing something? Like, do you see something in my life, basically, that I should be doing that I'm not doing? And do you think there's a girl maybe that, you know, I'm 22 at this point? Yeah, 22. Like, do you think there's a girl I should be pursuing? And he was like, I named off a couple. And he was like, no, none of those girls. I was like, okay, well, what do you think, Dad? And this is what he said. He said, you're going to think this is really weird, but God's really laid Joy Duggar on my heart, and I think you should start praying about her. And I was like, well, I have been praying about her, and I've been praying specifically that God would lay her on your heart and that you'd be praying about her. So,
Wow. Which is just so crazy because I knew him, but I did not spend a lot of time with his parents at this point. Like, I saw them every once in a while. I would go out to their farm and work. They have a family camp that his family runs, and they have like shooting ranges and stuff. So I would help with like activities at the family camp or the youth camps or whatever that they do. And so that would be like a couple times a year I would see his parents every once in a while, and then sometimes at church I'd run into him. But
All right, so then Austin kind of goes into the process of talking to Jim Bob and getting this process started and getting to know Jim Bob better, in hopes that he'll prove him talking to Joy.
No, I was nervous, but I had such a confidence that this is what I was supposed to be doing.
Okay.
Like, it was kind of like, all right, Jim Bob, when are you going to get on board? Because, like, I know where I'm heading, so the quicker...
Was it clear at that time that you guys were both interested in each other, but
No.
the courting hadn't started?
No.
Oh, you both didn't know that you both
No.
liked each other.
No.
That's so interesting.
I'm talking to Jim Bob for, like, probably a month and a half, and then he finally is like, hey, I probably should tell you that Joy actually really likes you, and like
He
she's
didn't tell you for
really
how long, but yeah, he said basically it goes both ways.
yeah.
What was this conversation like? Were you calling him on the phone?
Did you even
having
know this was going
a phone
on?
call
No,
every
I
day?
hadn't-
Like,
No, I was going
had
over
no
there.
idea that this
I
was going on.
Over
That's
at
crazy.
the house.
Was
Over
this
at the
once
big
a
house.
week? Like,
once a week. Yeah,
okay.
once a week
They
we
had
were
like
meeting.
a setup time. I had no. Like, I just wanted to let you know that Austin has come and asked if he can get to know you, like more than a friend. And I just remember like, are you kidding me or are you serious? Like what? Like I didn't know if he was joking with me, and I just started bawling.
Imagine how many guys reached out to the family, whatever, whether it was the girls or Jim Bob or whatever, to date his daughters. Like, I don't even know what the number is.
lot.
Hundreds of
Wait,
hundreds
really?
of hundreds of guys.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was actually just going through, well, since we moved a couple weeks ago, I was going through all my boxes, and I had my keepsake boxes, and I had letters in there from when I was like 16, 17. Guys from like jail or guys from just random
jail writing you letters?
Low-key, this is kind of what Ben did with Jessa when he would just, like, show up at church, like, basically trying to talk to her. It's kind of the story. So I would love to see some of those letters. You just know they're, like, unhinged or, like, God told me to marry you type of letters.
It wrote me, I think, was asking just to be a pen pal.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure Jana has a couple that were like, I want to marry you, or you're my forever, like, soulmate, like that kind of stuff.
They were really out here trying to get Miss Jana Marie to join the Bad Girls Club.
So your dad wasn't as involved in
Those
your
courtships?
brother's courtships as much as he was?
Yeah, they've been very different. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my brother. So it depends. I mean, I think they obviously have like some ground rules. Like, this is what we don't want y'all to do. But I think anything past that, like any standards, any whatever lines not to cross, would be set by the girl's parents.
That is really interesting that the brothers' courtships can kind of look like a large range of things. And I think that, especially with the show not airing anymore, we really don't know what those boundaries are anymore. And also, I wonder who had the most lax courtship of the boys. I definitely want to know what you guys think. I think I could probably guess for a few of them, but I want to know, like, who do you think had the most lax? Who do you think had the most strict? Like, top 3.
Was that intimidating to, date someone, to court somebody from this famous family on TV? Did that intimidate you, knowing how big the stakes were? Like, you didn't want to be the talking point on the next TV episode, like, that Austin guy really sucks. Like, he broke Joy's heart, and now we should cancel him. Like, did that freak you out?
It did, and I think that because this is obviously when the show is still blown and going, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's why Jim Bob wanted to have a month and a half relationship with me, right? Before, to see how real it is, and just, you know what I mean? Because to introduce a guy onto your family's TV show, and then next season or next episode he's gone. Like, just don't want that constant drama of news. Well, what happened to such and such and this and that and whatever.
True, because remember when Josiah and Marjorie broke up, and that was big news. So they probably got to quite far in the courtship process at that point, and it just didn't work out. And I think that's the only failed courtship that was shown on the show. So it looks like they do a pretty good process in vetting people and making sure it's gonna be the one before they introduce them to the show.
To town and then rode back with my dad. So I run up, give him a big hug, whatever. The rest of the time, I'm holding on to his arm, which at this point we weren't holding hands yet.
Oh.
We were
He
corny.
almost died.
Yeah, but I'm crying, holding his arm for probably a 10-15 minutes. Well, my brother that comes with my dad is like, Pops, Joy has been holding on to Austin's arm this whole time, and they're courting. They're not supposed to even be holding hands. And Pops looks back, kind of like annoyed.
I'm like, can I speak with you in the back for a minute? That's what I'm thinking.
Pops looks back, and he's like, Joy, you should probably let go of his arm.
I want to know who y'all think was, like, the tattletale brother, because I think it was absolutely James. Absolutely James.
So had you like done this process before? Like the previous girl, did you guys ever hold hands, or was like
No,
this whole courting thing completely new to you?
So we didn't get that far with the other girl. My sister had gotten married like a year before this, and they didn't have chaperones. My dad's theory is, like, if I can't trust you with my daughter right now, then why would I trust you with her being her husband and, whatever. And so I was around it. Like, that was the group, the homeschool group, whatever, that we were around.
That, talking to them, reading their books, all that. had rocked your world. And I wanted to know what you meant by that.
Okay, well, I'll probably get emotional because I always get emotional about this kind of stuff. So let's just rewind. So with Gunner, I had a super hard postpartum, and it was like the darkest time of my life. Anyway, but it was really good, but it was super hard, and so I feel like I just went through this with the hormone change. You know how it is.
Totally.
The hormones were super, super hard, and so you're going through postpartum, and then I felt like my family was just falling apart, and then a lot
Not
not you and us, but just my siblings and my parents and all this stuff was super hard at that time. And so I came to a point where I was just like, what is even real? What do I believe? Like all this stuff. Sorry. Anyway.
Take a break.
Yes, I came to this point in my life where I was just like, okay, and I think Austin had gone through this earlier when he like kind of went through rebellion and was like, okay, what am I going to believe for myself? What am I going to, and he figured that out a lot earlier than I did. But I feel like it was good, and I can see now looking back how much God grew me in that season. But I do feel like Ginger's book specifically was talking about just your faith in God and taking it from more of like, what can I do? But really, we grew up with so many standards, and I was great at keeping all of these standards. And my parents never preached one time that it was, you do all these things and then God will accept you. But that's how I took it.
And it really seems like that's how a lot of them took it that are now coming out and saying, Jill, Ginger, and Joy. It must be really stressful as a kid. I know with the religion or the amount of religion that I grew up in, it definitely caused some stress. When I started questioning things, for sure. So that's really unfortunate.
It all came just crumbling down when postpartum, my family had a lot of struggles at that time, and then these books come out. And I had to work through these things that I'd always felt like I'm never going to question God. Like I'm never going to do that. It was almost prideful of me to say like, oh, I'm never going to get to this point in my life where I will. And then I got to that point, and God's like, yeah, you're not perfect, and you don't have it all together, and your world's falling apart, and so what are you going to do about it? And so it was probably, that was a super hard time for us, just because I was out of it, and like mentally I just couldn't handle a lot. It was probably a good 6, 7, 8, 9 months of I just had a hard time getting out of bed, and had a hard time just doing what I need to do.
What is it like to go through conflict in your family when everything is just on blast? Like, it seems like every media outlet wants to make a story about it. They want to monetize, get the clicks. Like, how does that affect you personally? How does that affect your family? Because I don't think many people understand what it's like to have your personal life on display for literally everyone to see.
We've kind of created this own little bubble. And so we try really hard not to read a lot of comments and to search news. We know it's out there, but we can't control that. But we can control what we let in to our minds, our family, and then how it affects us. So we really try to keep a lid on just not letting so much bad into our minds and consuming our thoughts. And I cannot look at comments on Instagram or on any social media. I can't handle it. It makes me so mad.
Yeah.
And I want to get on there and start being a keyboard Karen.
That's really not surprising to me. I know in a lot of the vlogs, Austin would make little snide comments about like, oh, don't say that, the viewers are going to think that, and just kind of be a little snippy with it. So it really doesn't surprise me that he's like that with the comments.
My mom, she'll call me, she'll be like, can you believe what they're saying about you? I'm like, Mom, I don't even want to know, and don't you get on there and say nothing.
Didn't she at one point like create an account under another name?
My dad did. I think it was my dad.
They're like, we're gonna have this good comeback to so they could come back at certain comments. I'm like, how do you even know how to do that?
Rebuttal people that literally have nothing better to do than to sit there and criticize and whatever.
Sorry, Austin. I do technically, I guess, qualify as one of those people. Sorry about that.
What does the media get wrong about your family?
The one thing that comes to my mind that irks me is people are always saying, oh, well, your page is controlled by your dad, and your YouTube is controlled by your dad. And that kind of stuff, I'm like, we are our own family. And I can say that, but people are obviously going to believe what they believe. And so...
Well,
So I think that's coming from two places. One place without a crystal ball, but two, I think it's speculation that comes from kind of what Jill said. If he's controlling, your money on the show, it's not that crazy to think that he would control your finances on YouTube. I personally don't believe that. I think that, any kind of PR that's done is if they still have a PR company or it did at some point. I really doubt they do at this point because they really don't put much out anymore. But I can see why people think that. I personally don't believe to this day that Jim Bob's controlling what they're saying online. I think that the kids do like to defend him, or certain kids, Jessa, Jed, they do like to defend him whenever, if they feel it's necessary, but I don't feel as if that's accurate.
Some other headline of, I think maybe one of the siblings is getting married or something. Like, yeah, sometimes they get it right. Sometimes it's like, well, okay, who told the media? Like, who told the media Jana's fixing to get married or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
And so there is bits of like, how did that get out?
I mean, they've got so many people around them just by the fact that these families that they are associated with also have so many kids. I mean, that would be so easy to get out. I mean, please, how did that get out? Like, come on now.
Did that happen with Jana? Like, when she was getting married, did someone, like, leak to the media that she was getting married before?
I think so.
Yeah.
Who was it? Do you guys know who the whistleblower was?
We have our suspicions.
Was it from within the family or outside the
No,
family?
it's outside the family.
It's outside the family. Yeah.
It's somebody that had a invitation, and they were very...
Or got a picture of one.
Or got a picture of an invitation.
Oh, that's
so,
too bad.
Yeah, and then leaked it.
Yeah.
So...
Did they, like, leak the location and the date and everything?
Yeah.
That's so wrong.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to leak that Jana's getting married, but then to leak her wedding venue?
Yeah.
They actually did that?
Yeah. And
So first thought here, obviously that reminds me of our queen, Jill Rodriguez, leaking Ginger's wedding details to the media. But also, this clip, I was kind of like, girl, what are you talking about? Because I feel like we did not know what day it was going to be. We did not know where it was going to be till the day of. Did not know what day it was going to be till like the day before. Didn't even know who she was marrying until the day before when they filed for a marriage license. So I'm just kind of confused. Like, it leaked to the media. I mean, do you mean when you got the marriage license? I know that some outlets and Without a Crystal Ball was talking about it like a month before, being like, oh, I think Jana's getting married. Don't know to who. I just know it's going to be in August. But I feel like those kind of details this time around were not being leaked. So I don't know. Am I forgetting something? I just feel like that's not accurate.
For instance, 3 weeks ago, we get a loud knock on the door at 11:30 at night, and it's Domino's, and they said, we got an order for Joy Duggar.
Duggar.
Okay, well
Not Forsyth, Duggar.
that immediately tells me, all right, somebody's, and I was like, all right, is it paid for? They're like, nope. And I said, okay, was there a message? You got a number? Who ordered this? They're like, yeah, the message just says this is for Joyanna Duggar, and knock really loud at the door at 11:30 at night. So
That's so messed
Who
up.
at Domino's was like, yeah, this checks out?
You're too
Well,
sweet.
it happened all the time to my family. Like, multiple times. People would deliver, like, stacks of pizza and not pay for it. And so then my parents would just pay for it.
people would just show up at the door,
yeah.
babe. People would just like
Oh, yeah,
come
they'd drive
hop
down
over
our
the fence,
driveway.
knock on the door, and so
Yeah.
This could be totally false information, but weren't there just like a lot of like fans low-key getting invited to show up? That's probably why that happened more often to them than maybe the average person, and also because their house is so recognizable. But I think it's because of the low set boundaries. Obviously that's going to happen regardless, but I feel like it was a lot worse for the Duggars because those boundaries were not very strong.
when something like that gets leaked, like Jana's wedding, it's like,
Yeah.
is some crazy gonna come up here and interrupt the whole thing, or media, or you know
For
what I
all
mean?
of our weddings, like, while we were filming, the film crew would provide security for the
Yeah.
wedding so that nobody, like, crazy would show up.
Yeah.
Because back then we were having 2,000 people come to some of my sister's weddings. And so they would provide security just to vet.
That's good.
When life is so hard like that, how did you bring yourself to go seek out a counselor? Was that something that you decided on your own? Was that something that Austin was like, hey, I think you need to consider this? How did you make that decision?
At that point, I had actually been talking to a friend at church that had really hard postpartums as well, and I was telling her, here are some of my symptoms, and she was like, I think you're dealing with some bad postpartum depression, and alongside that, like, other family issues, I think are really hard on you. She's like, I would really suggest, and this is somebody I love and trust, she's like, I suggest that you go get Christian counseling. And so I I was really scared because I don't know why I had this thought of like you lay on a couch and you talk to this counselor and they ask you all these prompting questions, and then what if they, and I always have that fear in the back of my mind of what if they go and tell somebody, like, I'm a Duggar, like what if this gets out? But
well, that kind of stuff has happened,
yeah,
so
with
there's
just
always
friends.
that fear in the back
And
of
so-
where like you open up to a friend and
Yeah,
they end up
and
going
then
to
they
tell
go
the
and
media.
tell somebody.
Yeah.
And so
went to your doctor. We're talking to her, and she's like, well, I can prescribe this, I can prescribe this or this. And I was like, okay, tell me, what is the root cause? And then how are we going to, like, a medication can mask what's going on. It can trick your hormones, your
Yeah.
chemicals, whatever. But what is going on here, and how can we fix the root problem?
Well, because I asked her, I said, is there anything else? Because I was at the point where she was like, I think you need to get on some depression medication. And I was at the point of, okay, I know where I'm at. I'm not to that point where I feel like it's life or death situation.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but I kind of agree with them. If she's not to that point where she feels like she's in danger and there needs to be that kind of intervention, I do feel like, hey, like I do think that our society, at least in Western culture, has a problem with over-medicating issues and not really looking at the heart of it, the root cause. And so I think it's really great that she decided to, like, be like, hey, like, I had a bunch of shit happen to me. Like, my childhood was stressful. Maybe if she's not saying it in those words, but she's saying there are root things that I need to look at and really dig deep on, and maybe that will help. Obviously, that's not always going to be the answer, but since it wasn't like a life or death kind of situation, I think it's good that she tried to take care of like her mental instead of maybe going directly to medication, because I mean, pharmaceuticals, I do think that it is a possibility that we have an over-prescribing problem in America.
But ultimately, she's like, she needs to work through, she needs to talk through these issues and like go way back and figure out, you know, why she has this hurt, or and this is probably more outside the baby blue stuff.
Yeah,
this
I
is
think-
just the part of the perfect storm, just other stuff that had happened.
A lot of things from just growing up or whatever that I had never really dealt with. I had just built up, and it all just exploded at the same time.
You don't want to mask a problem. If the problem gets to the situation where it's like, dude, you're fixing to have a stroke if you don't, you know, get on some medication, then yeah, let's get on some medication, right? So you don't just die right here, right now. But like, okay, well, how can we change our eating habits so you don't have a stroke in the future or heart attack or whatever? And so counseling, being around good influences, moms that had gone through stuff, like I was really encouraging her to, you need to do that, like reach out. Or
I was really bad about just,
I think
I'll be fine, I don't need to talk to anybody. Like I guess I felt like I had to keep up this persona of like, I've got it all together. I'm this, you know, I grew up with a bunch of siblings. My family, we had, you know, my mom was super organized growing up. Like I don't know how she did it, but she really was organized, and I just felt like I had to be there already.
All right, y'all, finally, moving on to November, Anna decided to come back to Twitter again to celebrate Donald Trump's win of his presidency. It is Morning in America again from Elon Musk. It really seems like the only time she ever comes and talks to us publicly is to talk about Trump, so that's really interesting. Next in November, Jill shared a little story with us. It was in a Q&A, and somebody asked, how is your relationship with your parents? She said, complicated. I feel like we are in a rebuilding phase with them and getting healthy boundaries set up. For our final November update, Jackson joined Instagram. He is the youngest son of Jim Bob and Michelle. All right, we are finally in December. This is the current month. I'm currently filming December 19th, so hopefully nothing happens in the next like 12 days. But if there is, I'll leave in the comments. But for our final update, the U.S. Sun got really narrowed in on Josh and Anna for some reason. Someone took a photo of Josh in the prison yard, and it's the first time he's been seen in 2 years. And then somebody took one photo of Anna walking out of a building at an event. And then like a few days later, they caught pictures of her shopping with what looks like to be Maria Reed. Honestly, maybe the paparazzi photos of Anna and Josh did just shockingly well, so they wanted to capitalize on more photos. But this is the end of my update for 2024. Can you believe it? Sorry for the tons of Matt&Abby podcasts, but really it's like the only real thing I was interested in that they did this year. The Duggars were pretty quiet this year other than the weddings and the Matt&Abby podcast. But I really hope you enjoyed this update, and I hope you'll join me again for more videos.